You think America's suburbs are always safe and peaceful? Some of the places on this list were built right on top of buried chemical waste, abandoned mining tunnels, and even old nuclear test sites your real estate agent would never dare mention. Today, we're stepping into the top 10 most dangerous and creepy suburbs in America, beginning with a town sitting on a stretch of ground that still holds the traces of millions of people who once passed through and then vanished as if they never existed. Number 10. Colma, California. Colma looks like the kind of harmless suburb you barely notice on your way out of San Francisco, a gentle strip of sunshine, a couple of cafes, and quiet streets where nothing dramatic ever seems to happen. But then you learn the town has about 1,500 living residents and more than 1.5 million dead ones. That single number flips the whole place upside down before you even step out of your car. San Francisco once decided that cemeteries were an eyesore, the kind of thing that ruined property values and polite city views. So the city passed a ban on burials and began shipping its dead south, plot by plot, coffin by coffin, until Colma became something no town ever expects to become: the official overflow room for an entire region's departed. That decision still echoes today in the way Colma feels the moment the morning fog rolls in. Rows of headstones glisten like cold teeth under a gray sky. Marble angels rise behind iron fences as if keeping watch over a world that forgot them. Funeral cars glide past the grocery store with a familiarity that feels unsettling, like the town is stuck in a loop between the living and the long gone. And when the wind is still enough, the silence is so heavy it feels padded, as if designed to keep secrets buried. Imagine going for a morning jog and realizing your route is basically a lap around a million gravestones. That's when the story turns dark. Colma exists because the wealthy city to the north wanted to keep its skyline clean and its conscience cleaner. It exported its dead the way people export trash, and Colma absorbed it all quietly. San Francisco kept the skyline and shipped the skeletons. It's like the Bay Area took every uncomfortable part of its past, stuffed it into a giant storage unit, and that storage unit slowly evolved into a town with schools, shops, and a mayor. The contrast is almost surreal. So here's the real question. Would you buy a cozy little starter home knowing your true neighbors are not the folks waving from their porches, but 1.5 million people who never leave, never sleep, and never make a sound? It is a fantastic place if you enjoy peace and quiet. And in Colma, the quiet is very permanent. But living next to the dead is only the beginning. Living on top of them and knowing not all of them rest peacefully is where this list starts to get darker. Number 9. LANIER Suburbs, Georgia. At first glance, the neighborhoods around Lake Lanier look like the perfect southern escape. Blue water sparkling under the sun, families grilling by the shore, kids flying across the lake on jet skis, vacation homes lined up like postcards. It sells the dream of a weekend getaway that never ends. But for a fun family lake, LANIER has recorded hundreds of deaths. So many, in fact, that locals whisper a darker name for it: the Death Lake. That's where the illusion slips, and the story starts pulling you under. The tragedies stack up in ways that don't feel random. People drown in calm water. Boats collide in broad daylight. Swimmers vanish without leaving a ripple. And once you understand what's beneath the surface, it becomes harder to blame the victims. The lake is unnaturally deep, with a bottom littered with the remains of an entire town. Trees that were never cut down, old power lines, pieces of foundations, and roads that go nowhere. A single wrong kick of a foot can snag you on something no one's seen in 70 years. That's when the lake stops behaving like water and starts behaving like something that wants to keep what it touches. But the real weight of Lake Lanier comes from the town that was deliberately drowned to build it. Oscarville, a black community violently pushed off the map, now sleeps beneath the waterline. Some say the past never settled. Others point to the local legend of the Lady of the Lake, a woman in a flowing dress drifting near a bridge on foggy mornings, always silent, always watching. Whether it's grief, memory, or something stranger, the lake feels charged, like a place where unfinished stories cling to the currents. And if you visit at dawn when the mist curls low over the water, dead trees rise like fingers trying to break the surface, and the whole shoreline hums with a hush that feels almost intentional. The truth is that Lake Lanier is part infrastructure project, part memorial to a history people tried to submerge. It's like Atlanta tried to drown its past, and the past keeps grabbing ankles. A lake that looks like a postcard but behaves like a claw machine. And the question writes itself: would you let your kids jump off that dock knowing a drowned town and a long list of tragedies waits directly below? Because if you do go, maybe skip the night swim. The lake already has enough names etched into local memory. And if a vacation lake can be that lethal, what about a cute East Coast street where the real-life horror movie never really ended? Number 8. Amityville, New York. Amityville looks like the kind of waterfront suburb people dream about when they want a quieter life outside Manhattan. Boats sway gently along the docks, tree-lined streets cut through neat yards, and the old Dutch colonial houses look timeless and safe. It is the type of place commuters retire to, thinking they've escaped the noise of the city. But one house on Ocean Avenue turned this calm village into one of the most talked about haunted suburbs in America. The story begins in 1974 with an event that deeply unsettled the entire community. A family living inside the house experienced a night that changed everything, leaving the home marked by a cloud of grief that spread far beyond Long Island. Even today, longtime residents lower their voices when they mention it, as if the air around that memory is still heavy. And that was only the beginning. About a year later, the Lutz family moved in, hoping for a fresh start. Instead, they packed their belongings and left less than a month later, claiming the house refused to let them settle peacefully. What they described has fueled nearly 50 years of debate. Strange odors drifting through rooms without a source, a sticky residue appearing on walls as if the house were sweating, swarms of flies gathering in the dead of winter. Heavy footsteps across the upstairs hallway when everyone was downstairs. Whispered phrases urging them to leave. Doors closing on their own. Lights flickering without warning. It was as if the house had a mood, shifting, watching, reacting. Paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren visited and reported an atmosphere so oppressive that it felt like stepping into someone else's unfinished story. One infamous photograph from that night shows what looks like a small figure peeking from the staircase, an image people still argue about, frame by frame, decade after decade. That's when curiosity turns into discomfort, because the line between hoax and haunting isn't as clear as people wish it were. Amityville became the perfect storm: real tragedy, media attention, book deals, movie adaptations, sequels. A suburban house turned into a cultural symbol. Renovations have changed its appearance, even the street number has been altered, yet the story sticks to the place like a shadow that refuses to lift. As the saying goes, you can repaint the house, but you can't repaint the legend. So here's the question: would you sleep in a room where history whispers through the walls, simply because a listing calls it cozy and close to the water? Great schools, nice commute, and one tiny detail left off the brochure. You're living inside a full-blown pop culture ghost story. And Amityville is just one house. Our next destination is an entire town that no longer exists on maps, yet somehow refuses to disappear. Number 7. Times Beach, Missouri. Times Beach used to look like the kind of sleepy river suburb people from St. Louis would escape to for a quiet weekend. Today it's a green, peaceful state park. The twist is that the park is sitting exactly where an entire town had to be removed from the map. You wouldn't guess anything is wrong when you first drive in. The trails are clean, the picnic tables are new, and the Merrimack River rolls by like a postcard. But the deeper you go, the more the silence feels too heavy, almost rehearsed. That's usually the first clue that a place has a past no one wants to talk about. And the story here starts with something as ordinary as dust control. A contractor sprayed oil on the dirt roads to keep them from kicking up clouds, except the mixture happened to include waste sludge containing one of the most infamous toxins of the 20th century. For years, kids rode their bikes through it, families tracked it indoors, and no one realized the danger buried right under their shoes. Then came the flood, a brutal one that washed contamination across yards and living rooms. When the soil tests came back, the numbers were so alarming that the town's fate was already sealed. Evacuation, buyouts, and a complete shutdown. More than 2,000 people were told to leave the suburb they once thought would last for generations. Some left quietly, others refused until the final notices arrived, but in the end, the result was the same. Times Beach was dissolved, leveled, and fenced off. Its streets were scraped away, its homes were demolished, and the land that held decades of memories was turned into a federal cleanup project. Walk through the park today and the unease comes from the absences. A perfectly paved trail might actually be sitting on what used to be Main Street. A lonely utility pole stands where someone once had a porch swing. The signs explaining the former community feel oddly polite, as if trying not to wake something sleeping beneath the soil. It's a strange kind of suburbia where every pleasant view has an echo attached to it. And it raises a question most visitors don't shake off easily. If a whole suburb can disappear because of something mixed into a barrel, how sure can anyone be about the ground under their own feet? Especially when a place the government paid people to abandon now looks so harmless you could picnic on it. But Times Beach is nothing compared to the next suburb, where the past didn't just poison the land, it refused to stay buried. Number 6. Love Canal, New York. Love Canal looked like any ordinary working-class suburb of the 1950s. Small lawns, single-story homes, a school right at the corner, kids riding bikes in the street. For families near Niagara Falls, it felt like a modest version of the American dream. The twist was that this dream sat on top of thousands of tons of buried chemical waste. People didn't realize anything was wrong at first. Life played out normally. Weekend barbecues, laundry on the clothesline, school bells ringing every morning. But then the ground began pushing back. Strange black sludge seeped into backyards after heavy rain. Puddles formed with rainbow-colored sheens that never fully evaporated. Kids poked them with sticks, thinking they were just weird mud. Pets avoided certain patches of soil as if something beneath was humming. And this is where the story tilts into something far more disturbing. Families started noticing unsettling patterns. A cluster of unexplained illnesses on one block, repeated pregnancy complications in another. Parents compared notes quietly at first, convinced there had to be some explanation, until they discovered the pattern covered the entire neighborhood. Some residents began knocking door to door, collecting their own data because they felt no one else would. When the reports reached officials, the urgency finally broke through. Emergency declarations, health investigations, and the eventual relocation of hundreds of households. Houses were boarded up. Mailboxes leaned in empty yards. A rusted swing swayed in the wind with no children left to claim it. The suburb didn't empty overnight, but each departure carved a little more life out of the streets, leaving behind a quiet that felt less peaceful and more abandoned. The deeper truth was equally unsettling. A chemical company had buried massive amounts of waste decades earlier. Warnings were noted, then largely ignored, and the land, despite its history, was repurposed for homes, a school, and entire families who trusted the soil beneath them. It's the kind of story that feels almost metaphorical, except it isn't. It happened inch by inch, like a slow-moving fuse no one realized was burning. The white picket fences may as well have been hazard markers. And it forces a question few people want to consider. How safe can a nice neighborhood truly be if the ground itself is part of the problem? You can repaint a house. You can't repaint the groundwater. If Love Canal was a slow chemical horror, the next suburb shows what happens when the ground, the air, and even the wind seem to turn against a town all at once. Number 5. Picher, Oklahoma. Once upon a time, Picher was the kind of busy little mining town people were proud to put on a postcard. Lead and zinc meant jobs, stores, Friday night ball games, small parades on Main Street. Today it is a ghost town wrapped in white hills of mine waste that look almost pretty from far away. Drive in now and the first thing you notice is the emptiness. Main Street is still there in shape, but not in spirit. Storefronts sit hollow, signs hang crooked, traffic lights blink for cars that never come. All around town rise pale mountains of crushed rock from the old mines, piled so high they almost pass for dunes. Up close, they do not feel like sand. They feel like the remains of something taken out of the earth and never really put back in the right place. For years, that dust drifted into yards and school playgrounds, into lungs and onto kitchen tables. Tests later showed what no one wanted to hear. The soil, the water, and even the air carried heavy metals that could quietly damage bodies, especially the youngest ones. Children here did not just grow up near industry. They grew up inside the consequences of it. Underneath, the mining tunnels had been carved so aggressively that the ground itself became questionable. Maps of underground voids showed entire blocks that might not be stable. Imagine living in a house where the question is not just what is in the dust on the windowsill, but whether the earth under your bedroom is going to stay put. Bit by bit, Picher shifted from town to problem to federal project. Buyout offers came, families left, windows were boarded up, a school sat empty, books still inside for a while. Then a powerful tornado cut through and finished what the contamination started, tearing apart many of the remaining buildings. By the time the winds died down and the buyouts ended, Picher was less a place and more a warning sign that stretched for miles. In the end, Picher feels like a screenshot of what happens when a community is used up and then abandoned. The resource is gone, the profit has moved on, and what is left is a landscape where even the breeze feels unfriendly. Picher looks like someone forgot to press the undo button on a century of extraction. A former suburb turned into a caution label you can literally walk through if you are willing to ignore what might be blowing into your face. So ask yourself this: how much of a bargain is cheap land if the fine print includes long-term harm for the people you love? The price for each square foot does not mean much when every footstep kicks up dust. Nobody should really be breathing. Some suburbs die slowly. Others are still technically alive, but feel like they are decaying in real time. Number 4. East St. Louis, Illinois. Stand on the Missouri side of the Mississippi and everything shines. The Gateway Arch, the stadium crowds, the glow of downtown St. Louis. Cross the bridge, and the contrast hits instantly. East St. Louis once pulsed with industry and working-class pride. Today, whole blocks look as if they were emptied overnight, though people still live among the silence. The oddest part about East St. Louis is how quickly the atmosphere shifts. One minute you see the arch glittering behind you, and the next, you're driving through streets where time seems to have slipped away. Population loss hollowed out entire neighborhoods, factories closed, businesses folded, and the infrastructure, starved of funding for decades, began to cave in little by little. What remains feels half-occupied, half-forgotten, and the gap between the two is where the unease settles. Residents describe hearing freight trains echo across empty lots at 2 in the morning. Streetlights blink irregularly, leaving long patches of road in shadow. A burned-out church sits with its windows boarded as if still holding on to a memory it doesn't want anyone to see. Even the sidewalks feel tired, cracked, and warped as though they've been holding up the weight of the city too long. It isn't just physical decay. The social fabric here has been stretched thin by decades of economic collapse and structural inequality. When factories left, jobs disappeared. When jobs disappeared, families moved out to suburbs that promised more stability. The tax base shrank, public services frayed, and East St. Louis found itself in a loop that was hard to escape. People who remain often feel suspended between two worlds, connected to a major metro area yet isolated by the lack of opportunity right outside their door. The city feels unplugged, like someone pulled the power cord years ago and nobody ever plugged it back in. Even at noon on a sunny day, there's a strange sensation that it's always 3 a.m. somewhere nearby. And that's where the real tension lies. Cheap rent and proximity to St. Louis might look appealing on paper, but how much is that worth when walking to the corner store can carry an edge of unpredictability? It's the kind of place where the distance between comfort and caution is measured in footsteps, not miles. Crossing the bridge to Illinois takes 5 minutes. Leaving East St. Louis behind is easy, but being stuck on the wrong side of that divide, that's the part visitors never forget. If East St. Louis is Decay you can see in daylight, our next stop is a city hollowing out behind the Chicago skyline, one empty apartment at a time. Number 3. Gary, Indiana. Gary sits right on the edge of Lake Michigan with a clear view of Chicago's skyline shimmering across the water. On paper, that sounds like prime real estate. Once upon a time, it was exactly that, a proud steel powerhouse with steady jobs and busy neighborhoods. Today, Gary is known less for its view and more for the empty blocks, stretching mile after mile. The unsettling part is how quickly the landscape shifts. One moment you're on a highway lined with traffic heading towards Chicago, the next you're rolling past rows of houses where entire families once lived but no longer do. The collapse of the steel industry didn't just cut jobs, it unraveled the entire structure of the city. People left in waves, businesses shuttered, schools closed their doors, and what remained was a vast, echoing quiet that still hangs in the air like dust on a forgotten bookshelf. Walk through certain neighborhoods and it feels like stepping into a museum of abandonment. There's a library where books remain neatly stacked, the kind of place that once hosted after-school programs but now only hosts silence. There's a church with pews coated in a soft gray layer, sunlight slipping through cracked stained glass windows as if even the light feels hesitant to enter. The Old Palace Theater stands with torn seats and a stage that looks as if a single breath would make it crumble. It's the kind of environment where even daytime feels slightly unreal, like a simulation missing half its textures. At night, the city takes on an entirely different personality. Empty streets, wind rushing through alleyways, and a sense that the world ended quietly and nobody told you. But Gary's story isn't just about abandoned buildings. It's about what happens when an entire city depends on one industry, one employer, one economic engine. When the gears stop turning, the fallout isn't loud. It's slow, structural, and irreversible. Gary feels like an X-ray of what happens when the middle class is hollowed out, leaving behind a fragile shell of what used to be. A suburb frozen mid-collapse, stuck between past prosperity and future uncertainty. So here's the question. Would you move somewhere if half the neighborhood already packed up and left for good? If a street looks like it's auditioning for a zombie movie, it might be worth thinking twice before signing a long-term mortgage. And Gary's Decay, at least, is economic. Our next suburb hides something far more radioactive beneath its quiet surface. Number 2. Santa Susana, California. Look up from the quiet suburbs of Simi Valley, Chatsworth, or Woodland Hills, and all you'll see are rolling green hills. Most people think of them as nature preserves, hiking spots, maybe even a nice place for sunset photos. What they don't expect is that those hills once held a nuclear reactor, rocket test stands, chemical burn pits, and decades of experiments that rarely made it into the public conversation. The strange part about Santa Susana is how ordinary everything looks from below. Kids ride scooters on cul-de-sacs, parents jog with strollers. Backyards smell like Saturday barbecue. And right above them, up a winding, restricted road, sits the skeleton of one of the most controversial research sites in California. The partial reactor incident of the late 1950s wasn't widely discussed at the time. Outdoor burn pits operated for years in plain sight of the valley. And chemical waste, according to later reports, didn't always stay put. Residents in the surrounding suburbs started comparing medical stories, then noticing clusters of illnesses that felt too concentrated to be coincidence. Some described it as living next to a locked filing cabinet everyone pretended not to see. Walking near the perimeter today feels like stepping into a forgotten Cold War chapter. Tall fences slice across the hillsides with weathered warning signs, concrete pads sit half swallowed by weeds, graffiti covers the remains of old testing buildings left scorched after wildfire seasons. If you stand still long enough, you can hear wind rushing through openings where machinery once roared. And then you look downhill and see clean neighborhoods, elementary schools, baseball fields, bright playgrounds. It creates a bizarre double image. Normal life below, Cold War leftovers above. The deeper story behind Santa Susana is a mix of secrecy, industrial ambition, and a regulatory system that moved slower than the industry it was meant to oversee. Cleanup has dragged on for decades, becoming a tug-of-war between agencies, companies, and the people who live closest to the fence line. It's the kind of place that makes you wonder what else sits on hills across America, tucked away behind phrases like research facility or restricted access. And that leads to the question no one wants to ask at a backyard cookout. Would you feel relaxed grilling chicken 15 minutes from a hillside where a nuclear incident once unfolded? Zillow photos don't show radiation, soil history, or experimental burn pits. That's the real issue here. All of this is disturbing precisely because families still live just below those hills. Our final stop, though, is far darker. A suburb so cursed they no longer let you live there or even visit. Number 1. Dudleytown, Connecticut. Out in Litchfield County, Connecticut, everything looks like a postcard. Rolling hills, quiet country roads, white wooden houses, and autumn trees that turn the whole world into red and gold. It is the kind of landscape people move to for peace of mind. Hidden deep in that same forest postcard, though, is the scattered foundation of a settlement that picked up such a cursed reputation that today it is locked behind private land signs and quietly removed from the tourism brochures. Locals call it Dudleytown, but you will not see that name on a welcome sign. The story goes that the Dudley family carried trouble with them and that the little hill community they helped build never really found its footing. Over time, the place collected a chain of grim stories. Families here faced repeated misfortune, mysterious illnesses, breakdowns that no one could fully explain. Some residents left and never came back. Others simply faded from the records in ways that fed the legend. As decades passed, hikers claimed strange experiences among the ruins. Soft voices when no one else was around. The sense of being watched from between the trees, shadows shifting at the edge of vision, cameras that drain battery without reason. It might all be storytelling, of course, but it is the kind of storytelling that makes people lower their voices when the forest comes up in conversation. Walk up the old dark entry road and the mood changes long before you reach anything that looks like a town. The forest canopy thickens until the daylight turns murky. Stone foundations appear between roots, covered in moss like the earth is slowly swallowing the last proof anyone ever lived here. Low walls crumble into heaps. A cellar hole gapes like an open mouth. There are no friendly trail markers, no park signs, no gift shop, only stark metal gates and firm notices from the land trust making one thing absolutely clear. You are not welcome past this point. Whatever Dudleytown was, it is not a place you visit. It is a place you are kept out of. Rational explanations exist. The soil is poor. The land was isolated. People moved away for all the ordinary reasons people abandon hard ground and bad luck. But the combination of real hardship, eerie setting, and half-remembered tragedy created something stronger than any simple fact. Dudleytown became the suburban ghost story that never needed a movie deal. It is the suburb that lost its fight with the forest, and the forest did not just win. It kept the receipts. So the question practically asks itself, would you really push open a locked gate into a place that people around here quietly call cursed, knowing even the landowners do everything they can to keep visitors out? In most suburbs, the warning comes as a letter about your lawn. Here, the warning is the gate that never opens. And that is the thing about American suburbs. From the street, they all look kind of the same. It is what lies underneath and what refuses to stay buried that makes the difference. So that is the thing about American suburbs. From a distance, they all look harmless. Trees, driveways, school buses, maybe a strip mall and a coffee shop. But as we just saw, not every charming town hides a happy story. Some of them are built on chemical waste, some sit under old reactor sites, and some carry a history that never makes it into the real estate listing. Now I want to hear from you. Which suburb on this list rattled you the most? And which one would you still be tempted to move into if the price was low enough? Be honest. Everyone thinks they are different until they see the photos. If this tour of America's creepiest suburbs made you look twice at your own neighborhood, hit like, share your thoughts or your local stories in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives into places you are probably better off visiting on YouTube only.